Hey, everybody. So good to see you all. So glad you could join us. Happy Monday. I'm really happy to have such a big group here today to talk about rapid rehousing utility allowances. It's really a super important way that we can help households who are really struggling to make ends meet, get them a little bit of extra money in their pocket to help with utilities. And so super excited that we're able to do that and that we're talking about that important topic today. I am Lauren Reddy with Housing Innovations, and I'm going to be doing a lot of the presenting today. And I'm joined by Shannon Quinn-Sheeran. Shannon, hey. On our team at Housing Innovations. We are the consultants who help to staff the Connecticut Balance of State Continuum of Care. And we've also been working with DOH on
By the way, I love my no button.
On the new rapid rehousing operations guide. Sorry, losing my words on this Monday afternoon. So we're also joined today by our partners at ACT, Melanie Alvarez and Brendan and their team, and they are going to be talking to you about some of the nitty-gritty operational procedures for how this is all going to work. And I'm not sure, do we have folks from DOH in the room, Shannon? Do you know? Katie, I see Katie. And I see, I think Katie's on with us from DOH. So invite my partners at DOH and ACT and Shannon, if I get anything wrong or forget anything, please jump in and interrupt. And Melanie has her hand up.
Oh no, that's just a reaction for me waving to everybody. That's me saying hi.
Hi,
so
everybody.
Before we get started, as a matter of housekeeping, there's like these really cool reaction buttons in Zoom that I hope you all use, even if your camera is not turned on, because I always like cameras turned on when I'm presenting, so I know that people are actually listening to me and not reading their emails and on the phone with clients, because everybody's time is limited. But this is super, super important. So if you guys could just use our the reaction buttons, if you don't have a camera, just to let us know that you're like here, that would be really, really great because they're wonderful. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says more, and under there it says reactions. And then there's like a thumbs up and a heart, and you could choose other ones, or you could raise your hand. There's lots of things, so please utilize that function because it'll help us as presenters as we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. All right, and we are also just a couple of other quick housekeeping things. So Shannon just posted the slides into the chat, so you can access them there. I think those at this point are just the housing innovation slides. We will get the ACT slides up on the CT Boss website ASAP. So you have all of the content after today's training. Shannon's recording today, so you'll be able, anybody that's missed the training can always watch the training. That will also go up on the CT Boss website very soon. We are asking that folks stay muted today when you're not speaking. It really just helps to cut down on the background noise. But by all means, we encourage people to unmute and ask questions. This is always goes much more interesting for everyone if it can be more of a conversation instead of just me and Melanie talking at you all. So please feel free to unmute at any time to ask questions or add to the conversation. You can also put questions in the chat box. Shannon is going to be monitoring the chat box for us, and we will field those questions as we go. We are scheduled to end at 3 p.m. today, and we are respectful of people's time, and I promise you we will end on time. If there are any questions that we haven't gotten to answer at 3 p.m., I'll stay on for a few minutes to answer as many of those as I can. And both of our teams, the ACT team, the Housing Innovations team, as well as our team at DOH are always available to answer your questions outside of today's training. So,
Lauren.
Yeah.
So I know this is specific to rapid rehousing. Is there information that would be helpful here for PSH projects, or Somebody's
Nope.
asking if they should stay on. Okay, okay.
Nope, if
No,
you are
no.
a PSH project, this training this morning is going to be about using utility allowances in the DOH rapid rehousing programs. And so if you are from a different kind of program, PSH, transitional housing, emergency shelter, we appreciate you being here, but we invite you to spend your day, your afternoon doing something else, because this is not going to be helpful for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Shannon. All right. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to start just by getting to know each other a little bit real quick in some breakout rooms. Then we're going to talk about just the nitty gritty, like the basics, right? What is a utility allowance? Why are we doing this? What's the difference between a utility allowance and a utility reimbursement? We're going to talk about who is going to actually, ACT, which is the main fiduciary agency in the state for the Rapid Rehousing Program, will be cutting utility reimbursement checks to. We're going to walk through some examples that really help you to understand how this works. And then we've broken this down into some simple steps for you guys to do this. We like to make this all as easy as possible for you. I'm going to turn it over to Melanie. She's going to talk about ACT's procedures, how actually on the ground, what the steps you guys have to take to make sure that your tenants, when they are entitled to one, are getting that utility allowance. Then Melanie's going to pass it back to me, and I'm going to talk about, just do a quick final review of some other tools and resources we have available. And hopefully by that point, we will have answered all of your questions. But if we have not, we will continue to answer any lingering questions that you have. So before we get started with everybody, since we're not able to meet in person and we're doing these things by Zoom, we'd like to take a few minutes every time we meet on Zoom to just have a little bit of time to get to know each other, to say hello to your colleagues. And so we are going to put you into breakout rooms for a moment. We're probably just going to take like maybe 5 minutes, and you can introduce yourselves to each other. So who you are, what agency you work at, what position do you have at that agency, the reason why you joined today, right? Why this topic is important for you, and then what you're looking forward to this summer. We always try to share something a little fun in these conversations. So Shannon, can you get us into breakout rooms, or do you want me to do that?
Hey, Shannon, you're muted. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I just realized that. Like 25 waiting rooms, 4 people each.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
While we're doing that, I'll just say what I'm looking forward to. So I am looking forward to going camping on the Chesapeake on Friday. So very excited about that.
Yay.
We have like 100 people.
We'll see when everybody comes back into the main room. We'll get an accurate count, but we had, close to 100 people who said they were coming. So we'll see.
Yeah,
That's great.
Big group.
That's a great attendance rate, because that pretty much covers every single rapid rehousing case manager in the state, I think.
Yeah.
It's about right.
Yeah. There are probably some agencies that have more than one person here, but so it looks like we've still got some people in
22 seconds. 22
Yeah.
seconds left, 18 seconds.
Weird, mine says 60 seconds still. Zoom is not playing nicely today.
Did they not? Oh, is it not letting people come out?
No, no. Hopefully it's letting people come out. So we're having trouble getting in. Hopefully it's not life sentence, the breakout room.
Right.
So just bear with us 1 minute, guys, while everybody that is in a breakout room is rejoining. We'll get started again in just a moment.
They should be closed now.
Okay. So welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had a chance to hear a little bit of fun and exciting things about what your colleagues are going to do over the summer. I know we had a little chat with a couple of people in our room and heard at least one person headed down to New Orleans. So that's fun, although maybe a little sweaty in New Orleans in the summer. Hopefully she's got good air conditioning wherever she's staying. All right, so we've got 81 people, it looks like, who've joined, so quite a little crowd here, and I am going to move us into our next slide. Shannon, you want to start the record again?
I had already.
All right, so just a reminder, I feel like for me personally, this is always a good reminder every single day, right? There's a lot that we are all trying to manage, and this utility allowance stuff is, HUD has made it pretty complicated, and so it involves some math, but not math that you have to do. So don't worry, I know not everyone loves math. DOH is making available a spreadsheet to do that math for you. And I just think it's so important for all of us to just smile and breathe, and most importantly, be patient with ourselves and patient with each other as we learn this new thing. We're going to walk you through it today. We're going to walk you through a bunch of examples. Like I said, there's the rent calculation tool. Everything is written down in the operations guide. So if you feel a little confused as we're going through today, please don't worry. It's all going to be okay. We'll get as many of your questions answered today as we can. And if you still have questions at the end, you've got supports around you to help you get through it. So breathe and don't worry is our tagline for today. All right, so this is, a lot of you, I think, were with us in March when we originally launched the new DOH Rapid Rehousing Operations Guide. We are putting some finishing touches on that with some of the ACT procedures in the next couple of days, and we're going to get the new version of the guide updated with all the information that we're going to be talking about today up on the CT Boss website on the resources page. Within the next few days. So we'll send out an email alert to everyone when that gets done, so that then you can make sure that you are using the most current version of the guide, which will be the June 2022 version. And just a quick, step background reminder for everyone, or in case you weren't able to join us or you're new, since we originally released the guide in March of 2022. What it really is the rules of the road for the DOH Rapid Rehousing Program across the state. So it really is, in one place, puts together all of the most important policies and procedures and what forms you have to do when for the Rapid Rehousing Program. And it covers 3 different funding sources, right? So it covers the programs who are getting Emergency Solutions Grant money, ESG Rapid Rehousing money through DOH. It covers the CT Boss funded rapid rehousing programs, and it covers the Opening Doors Fairfield County Rapid Rehousing Program. So if your program has any of those funding streams, please be sure you are looking at the operating guide and using it and following the protocols that are outlined in that guide. And please also make sure that you have retired the documents that the guide replaces, right? So we used to use this thing called the Connecticut Rapid Rehousing Model Guidelines, and there was also a document that was the ESG policies and procedures. Those are no longer current, right? The current rules of the road are defined in the operations guide. So that's the document that you want to be using. And again, the most current version, the June 22 version, is going to be posted on the CT Boss website within the next few days. All right. We also, back in March, when we originally launched the guide, launched a new repository for all the forms that you guys use for this program. that DOH has helpfully created a whole bunch of forms and sample letters and all sorts of great stuff to make this as easy as possible for you guys. Those documents used to live on the CCEH website, and they no longer do. So now if you go to the CCEH website, you're like, oh, what happened to all the forms? This is the link here on this slide. Those forms now live on the Connecticut Balance of State or CT BOSS website. And you can click here and get to them all. A couple of important things to note. DOH created a brand new form to help with the utility allowances. So that's hot off of the presses. So you'll need to go to this link and get that form in order to do the things that we're going to talk about today. And then DOH also updated a whole bunch. I won't go through all of them. They're bolted on this slide, but they updated a whole bunch of the forms, right? So please make sure you're visiting this link and that you are purging the old version of those forms from your files and you are using these new forms. So, all right. So this also should hopefully be a reminder for most folks. We went over this when we were on the webinar that we did in March about the operations guide. But these are basically the new rent payment standards that are going to be in effect starting July 1. So right around the corner, July 1 is right around the corner. So these are, nothing's changing for YHDP, right? The YHDP rent payment standards incorporated the utility allowance in from the beginning of YHDP. So that's not changing. So what's changing here are the rent payment standards for the non-YHDP, ESG, and COC programs. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly for anybody that hasn't heard this already. So basically what's going to happen is that when somebody is a participant in a rapid rehousing project, in month 1 of their participation in the project, the security deposit, the first month's rent, and any applicable utility allowance, and we'll talk about what that means, so don't worry, are going to be covered at 100%, right? So the participant is not going to have to pay anything. The program is going to cover 100% of security, 100% of first month's rent, and the participant, if they do not have a unit that is all utilities included, is going to get some little bit of money back towards the utility allowance. All right, and we'll talk about the details of that. In months 2 to 6, the tenants are going to pay 30% of their net income towards rent and towards any applicable utility allowance. And then the rapid rehousing program is going to cover the remaining rent and if there is any remaining utility allowance. And again, we'll explain what that means in a minute. Month 7, until the participant leaves the program, the tenant's going to pay 60% of their net income towards rent and any applicable utility allowance, and the program is going to cover the rest. Now, those first 3 bullets are going to cover the vast majority of folks that are in our rapid rehousing program in the state. We've got some people that are sort of in rapid rehousing temporarily, but they've been approved to go on to some sort of more permanent subsidy. So for example, permanent supportive housing, or an EHV, emergency housing voucher, or a mainstream subsidy, or what we used to call the Section 8 program, now called that Housing Choice Voucher program, right? There are these other subsidies that we have available in the state for people. And sometimes we put someone in rapid rehousing just until we can get everything together to get that other subsidy started. And for those people only, their portion is calculated at 30% of their net income until they transition to the other permanent subsidy, right? So to keep it, sort of consistent across the 2 different types of programs. But the vast majority of people are going to fall into one of these 3 bullets that I went over first. So then the question is, okay, so the 3rd bullet says month 7 to program exit. What does that mean, right? When does the financial assistance end? So the financial assistance ends for most people within 12 months, right? The goal of the program, this is a rapid rehousing program. The goal of the program is to get people off of assistance as quickly as we can. The program is not intended to provide assistance beyond 12 months. So for most people, the assistance is going to end within 12 months, hopefully sooner for many of them. There is an extension policy that's outlined in the guide. So it is possible to extend people beyond 12 months, but you have to go through a process in order to make that happen. And hopefully those extensions are going to be rare. Our focus today really is on the utility allowances. So I'm not going to go through that extension process, but it's clearly outlined in the operations guide. And it's also in the slides from the March webinar, that we did. So if you're not sure what that process is, please look in one or both of those places and all the information you need will be right there. The other way the financial assistance ends for people is when their net income, right, is equal to or greater than 60% of gross rent, right? And so gross rent means, and we'll go through some examples of this to make it clearer for everyone. Gross rent means the rent that actually gets paid, like the amount in the lease that you have to pay the landlord, right? What we think of typically as the rent, right? Plus the utility allowance. So that makes it a little easier for people. It just gets them, a little bit extra assistance rather than ending it when 60% of income equals just the rent that's owed to the landlord. So just a little bit of a boost to help our folks make ends meet and make this all work for them and make it so that they can stay stable in their housing. So do we have any questions yet? And then, okay. So what exactly, I keep using this word, utility allowance. So what is a utility allowance? And hopefully for some of you, this isn't all totally brand new because we've been using utility allowances in the permanent supportive housing COC program for many years. It's required by HUD. So hopefully for any of your agencies that also have PSH programs, this is not a brand new concept, but for some people it probably is a brand new concept. So a utility allowance, first of all, everything that we're going to talk about today only applies to folks who are living in a unit where their utilities are not included in their lease, right? And I know you guys are great, despite all of the challenges and how terrible the housing market is across the country, especially in Connecticut. You're great at, I don't know how you do it, but finding those utilities included units. So if you've got somebody in a utilities included unit, the utility allowance doesn't apply. It only applies to people who are responsible for paying their own utilities. So, and basically what it does is it's just a little, extra money to help keep housing affordable for our folks that are really struggling so much to make ends meet. And it's determined every year by DOH. There's a schedule that's determined that says the amount that's necessary to cover reasonable utility costs. So that utility allowance amount that shows up on that DOH schedule is what we're talking about, okay? So who determines that amount? DOH determines that amount. The schedule is right here linked on this slide. So if you're not familiar with it, you can click right here and open it up. There's the schedule that starts July 1st, 2022 is the one that we've linked to here. It gets updated every year. And basically it's, you look at it and you say, okay, this is a 1-bedroom unit. It's in a high rise, right? Or this is a 2-bedroom unit and it's in a garden apartment, or it's a single family house, right? So based upon the bedroom size and the kind of unit, like high rise, garden, one single family home, the schedule will show you all of these different kinds of utilities, right? Like electric, gas, water, sewer, right? And how much credit the tenant is eligible for in a utility allowance, depending upon the unit size and type of housing. It's pretty straightforward. So the thing that maybe gets a little bit confusing is the difference between utility allowances a utility reimbursement and what the person's actual utility bill is. So we're going to clarify all of that for you today. So the question, do the utility allowances cover 100% of the tenant's utility bills? And the answer to that is not necessarily, right? Because the utility allowance is a fixed amount that's established annually by DOH, right? So that schedule changes once a year on July 1st. It doesn't change every time, it doesn't change from winter to summer, right? It doesn't change if somebody is, leaving their air conditioning on all winter and has extraordinarily high electricity costs, right? Their utility allowance that they're entitled to has nothing to do with their actual bill. So their bill could be, usually their bill is going to be higher than the utility allowance, right? So the utility allowance isn't going to be enough to cover their full energy bill usually. But in some cases, the utility allowance might actually be more than what their bill is. So if somebody's very good at conserving energy, and it's the winter and they've got gas heat and they're not really having a lot of electric expenses, the utility allowance may actually be a little higher than the bill. So it's important to remember that the utility allowance is different than the amount that the tenant actually owes to the utility company. All right, so why are we doing this? It seems complicated. Why are we doing this? The main reason why we're doing this is just what I said before, right? We know people are really struggling to make ends meet, and we just, need to get them as much help as we can to be able to afford their housing and stay stable in housing. So that's ultimately the goal here. We are also required to do this for the COC program by HUD. So HUD requires that when you calculate rent in the COC Rapid Rehousing program, that you consider both the rent that has to get paid to the landlord and the utility allowance if the tenant is responsible for paying some utilities. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, we really don't have local discretion on. It's a HUD requirement. HUD has a very detailed, anyone that's interested in it is, can read it, a very detailed notice about how all of this has to work in the COC program. So does every rapid rehousing participant get a utility allowance? And the answer to that is no. Unfortunately, every rapid rehousing program does not get a utility allowance. Participants whose utility costs are included in their rent are not going to get a utility allowance. So you need to pay close attention to what's in someone's lease. If they're got a all utilities included unit, this is irrelevant, right? If they've got a lease that says they are responsible for paying utilities, you have to know which utilities they're responsible for paying, because sometimes the lease will be tenant is responsible for the electric, landlord is responsible for the water and sewer. That's a common one, right? So in that case, that tenant is going to get a partial utility allowance, right? They're going to get the proportion of the utility allowance that is the electric, but not anything that the landlord is responsible for in the example I just gave, the water and the sewer, okay? So DOH is in the final stages of putting some finishing touches on a rapid rehousing tool that Housing Innovations worked on. Bo at DOH is making a couple adjustments to that. That tool is going to be available hopefully within the next few days. The YHDP rent calculation tool, that tool has accounted for utility allowances, since YHDP started. You basically have to just enter the utility allowances that the person is responsible for paying into that tool. As soon as that rent calculation tool gets up onto the CT Boss website, we will send a notice out to you guys to the email list, and we'll show you at the end of the slides. We've got a slide that shows you how to sign up if you're not already signed up for the CT Boss email list. Do we have any questions? Nope, still no questions. All right.
I just have one, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't be, please. I'm tired of talking, I'm glad.
I have individuals that are subsidy, and they may have been in the program for maybe 6 months. So that means that when July 1st starts, I have to start utilizing utilities if they are required to pay utilities.
That's right. So starting July 1st, you'll, let's say they're already in month 6 of the program, right? They're still in month 6 of the program. So you're going to apply the month 6 rules, which include a utility allowance.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
the clock doesn't start over. You just have to start considering the utility allowances. Good question. Okay.
Just to piggyback off of that, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So when I'm doing rental calculations for July, that would count with that, or would it be just July 1 and up, so like August rent?
So if you're doing, so we're going to start using it in July. So it would start with August rent.
Okay.
And this is a place where please, Katie or anyone else that's on from DOH, if I say anything wrong, you'll jump in and correct me.
There's a question in the chat too, Lauren.
Yeah, I see it. Are we
Okay.
supposed to be getting a copy of the client's light or gas bill? So we're going to go through all of the details about what paperwork is required. So just hold that question for a minute. We're going to get to it later on in slides. But just the thing to remember now is that the utility allowance is established by the DOH utility allowance schedule, not by what the bill is. Okay. All right. So there are a couple of key differences. So some of you guys have rapid rehousing programs that are funded either through CT BOSS or ODFC with COC funds. Some of you guys have ESG Emergency Solutions Grant, rapid rehousing programs that are, that you get the money through. Well, all of you are getting the money through DOH. Some of them are COC funded, some of them are ESG funded. And there's some differences between those two programs, and we're going to highlight what those differences are as we go through the slides today. But just make sure you know whether your program is a COC program or an ESG program. If you're not sure, ask someone at your agency. If they're not sure, ask your contact at DOH and they'll be able to help you figure it out, because there are a couple of nuances here that are going to be different depending upon what kind of funding you're getting. So here's one of those differences, right? So this is just kind of a top level overview of what are the types of utility allowances that are allowable. And they're a little different between the COC program and the ESG program. So I'm going to start at the bottom actually of this slide and the text that's in red. So across all the programs, right, no one's ever entitled to a utility allowance for phone or internet. Right, so that's not part of what this all considers. In the COC program, people are entitled to a utility allowance for their gas and oil, right? So that includes propane. I don't think probably too many people in Connecticut have propane heat. Maybe in some of the more suburban and rural areas, you've got some propane, cooking and heating happening. So gas and oil, electric, right, and that includes electric. The way that they break it out is kind of weird, right? It includes, there's like 2 different kinds of electric. It's the main electric and then the electric for the appliances. So if they have, which I think most people do have in the state of Connecticut, electrics, or maybe they have gas stoves or refrigerators. I think very few people have propane refrigerators probably in Connecticut. So there's a couple different kinds of electric allowances in there, depending upon what kinds of appliances people have. And then water and sewer, that's one I said earlier, is often, although not always, paid by the landlord rather than by the tenant. So you got to make sure you pay attention to that. And then in the COC program, they can also get an allowance for trash removal, which is, again, often sometimes the landlord pays for, but sometimes something the tenant has to pay for. Who knows why HUD makes the rules the way that they make them, but for some reason, trash is not an allowable utility expense in the ESG program. So again, you want to make sure you know what kind of funding your program has, so you know which utility allowances you should be putting into the rent calculation tool. All right. So now we're going to talk about a utility reimbursement, which is a little different than a utility allowance, right? So a utility, actually, before I do that, let me just say, so with a utility allowance, what's going to happen is that, let's say the person, when you add up all of these kinds of utilities that the person is responsible for, let's say the sum of that is $100, right? And when you calculate in the rent calculation tool, what the tenant's portion is, what they're required to pay, it's only $50, right? That's when you start to get into the utility reimbursement, right? Let's say the tenant, the utility allowance is $100 and the tenant portion is $200. So what's going to happen is rather than paying $200 to the landlord, the tenant is going to get, because their utility allowance is $100, they're only going to have to pay $100 to the landlord because we're giving them credit basically for what they have to pay on utilities. So that's why I'm saying that this makes it a little bit easier for folks to be able to afford their housing because they're going to get credit towards those utilities and they're going to have to pay less to their landlord. All right. So in some cases, what you're going to have is people who the utility allowance is 100, their portion is only 50, right? So they're actually going to get a reimbursement. So there's going to be $50 in that case that the fiduciary agency is going to pay either directly to the tenant or preferably directly to the utility company. So, the utility allowances help everyone who has a unit that is not utilities included, but only people where the sum of all of the utility allowances exceeds their portion, what they're required to pay, are they going to actually get a check either to them or to their utility allowance, to their utility company. All right. So to help make that, and we're going to walk through plenty more examples of this, so don't worry if you're confused. We're going to look sort of side by side at what's the difference between a utility allowance and a utility reimbursement, just to review sort of what we just talked about. So the utility allowance, right, is the amount that's specified in the DOH utility allowance schedule. And that's the amount that you're going to enter into the rent calculation tool. So they get 50 for water, they get 50 for electric. I'm making these amounts up. And then the tenant portion, so what they're responsible for paying, is going to be applied first to the utility allowance, and then anything remaining for what they're responsible for, they pay to the tenant. So again, an example, that if the tenant portion is 300 and the utility allowance is 100, right, the tenant's going to get credit towards that $100 utility allowance, and they're only going to have to pay $200 to their landlord for rents, okay, as opposed to utility reimbursement. So the utility reimbursement is only takes effect when the amount of the utility allowances is greater than the tenant portion, right? And all of this is, again, you don't have to do math. It's all going to be on the rent calculation tool. And that's the amount that the fiduciary agency, in most cases, the fiduciary agency is ACT, is going to pay either to the COC participant or to the utility company. So an example there, the utility allowance is 150, the tenant portion is 100, right? The fiduciary agency ACT normally is going to pay $50 in a utility reimbursement. Okay. So who is ACT going to cut that check to? It looks like we have a question. Let me just go to the chat here before I move on. So Katie chimed in.
So Sasha asked how the reimbursement gets paid to the client, and we're going to review that in my presentation. So just hold that thought, Sasha. We'll get to it, I promise.
Thanks, Melanie. And then Katie just wanted to let people know, somebody asked earlier, does this start getting applied in July or August? You're required to start doing this effective July 1st, but Katie says you're welcome to start sooner if you'd like to start before July 1, although July 1 is right around the corner. So, okay.
And you do need a copy of the bill. That's what the question was. But if you can't get a copy of the bill, because let's suppose this is a rental startup and it's an initial application and you can't get a copy of like a current bill, you just have to have some documentation that utilities are required for part of the lease, and you can get something from the light company for service at that address with the account number and the potential account holder, for example. Because this is different than when you do a utility startup and pay somebody's arrearage for lights. So this is a totally separate thing. So under ESG, we are allowed to pay utility arrearages. So this is something totally separate. So I just want that to be clear for people as they're listening to this, because this is not the same thing. It's different. And people, that might be a confusion. So
Thank you, Melanie. All right. So who's going to get the utility reimbursement payment, right? And again, it's a little different from the COC program to the ESG program. So we tried to lay out the two clearly side by side here on this slide. So in the COC program, what we prefer is that the payment is going to go to the utility company, right? And that requires, though, and this is a HUD rule, the participant to give written permission for ACT to make that payment to the utility company. And so that, remember back when we were talking about the forms repository, I said DOH had created this brand new form number 13. That's the purpose of that form, right? So if you've got a tenant in a COC Rapid Rehousing program who's entitled to a utility reimbursement, you want to have them fill out form number 13 to give ACT permission to make that payment to the utility company. And we'll talk on the next slide about why. And then ACT obviously is going to need to have like Melanie just said, some information about, the account number, where they're supposed to send the check, which utility company it is, in order just operationally to make that happen. The less preferred option in the COC program, tenants are entitled to this in the COC program. And so if a tenant does not wish to give permission to pay the utility company, then ACT will cut a check directly to the tenant. And that's going to mean that we're going to talk about the downsides of that in a minute, but that's going to mean that the tenant has to submit a W-9 with their social security number to ACT. And it also means that ACT has to issue a 1099 in that client's name. And we'll talk in a minute about those implications. On the other side, on the ESG side, HUD requires that the payment go to the utility company. And so, Melanie will go through all of what ACT needs in order to make that happen. It's not allowed actually in the ESG program for ACT to make that payment directly to the participant, to the tenant. So again, it's important for you guys to know what's the funding stream that this person's getting assistance under. Is it ESG or is it COC? And if you're not sure and no one else at your agency is sure, your DOH team can help straighten that out for you. Okay, so what do I do if I've got a COC participant who doesn't want to give ACT permission to pay the utility reimbursement to the utility company? And I think, it's like any other choice, right, that participants make. Like ultimately it's their choice, and our job is to help them understand their options and to make a choice and to understand what the implications are of all the options that are available to them. So, we want to make sure that people understand a couple of things if they make that choice. One is that obviously, if the money goes directly to the electric company, they're guaranteed that that money's gone towards their electric bill and it just helps them keep their lights on, right? That might be less compelling for some people than the other arguments on this slide, which is that, that's fine if they want to do it that way. They're going to have to provide a W-9 to ACT. They're going to have to, put their social security number on that W-9 or their tax ID number if they don't have a social security number. And then ACT is going to have to issue a 1099, which then it just complicates the whole tax thing, right? For participants, that 1099 is then reportable on their taxes. They're going to have to keep track of it. They're going to have to include it when they do their taxes. You know, and we can't say today what implications that has for people in terms of what taxes they're going to owe, or what their, you know, implications might be for any benefits that they are eligible for or not eligible for, right? Because all that stuff is very complicated and very dependent upon individual circumstances, right? But it's possible that there could be tax implications and benefits eligibility implications for people. And we just want to make sure that they understand that when they make that choice.
There's a couple of items about the 1099, Lauren. So I think you just answered 1099 is issued by act, right?
That's correct. So the 1099, you guys don't have to worry about the 1099. You just have to get now I'm getting into the W-9 from your tenants, and then ACT will issue the 1099. The next question, I'm going to defer to Melanie. So Amanda says 1099 would only be if they got 600 or more, right? I don't know if that's the correct number. Melanie, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I answered in the chat. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So yes, it's anything over $599 is a 1099 automatic, but we track all of it. It is only reportable over $599. But let's say somebody's getting $50 a month. That adds up pretty quickly. And there's a possibility that if they're in rapid rehousing for more than 6 months getting these payments, then that could impact them adversely, potentially, for their benefits and whatnot. But yes, it's $599. That's the IRS rule. We
All
will
right.
collect the W-9 on the front end regardless of if they go over that amount. So just so you guys understand that.
All right. Any other questions before I move us into the poll? All right, we're going to just do a little poll here as a refresher. All right, so question number 1. Which rapid rehousing participants will receive a utility allowance? You guys can go ahead and put your answers right into the Zoom and the poll. Option number 1, participants whose utility costs are included in their rent, participants who are responsible for paying their own utility costs, or both. That's our first question. The second question, can people see the poll? Yeah, okay, good. The second question, there we go. We got some answers in the poll now. Got nervous for a minute when I didn't see any answers. The second question is, what determines the utility allowance amount that the rapid rehousing provider should enter into the rent calculation tool? The current amount due to the utility company on the participant's last bill, the past due amount owed to the utility company, or the amount shown on the DOH utility allowance schedule. And then finally, the third question, which utility allowance amount should the rapid rehousing provider enter into the rent calculation tool? You're going to ask the participant and enter the amounts they tell you they are responsible for paying. You're going to verify on the lease which utilities the participant is responsible for paying and enter those, or you're going to help the participant to prepare a budget and enter only allowances for utilities they cannot afford to pay. So I'll give everyone a minute. Looks like we've got about 50 and growing. We've got about 87 people on our Zoom today. So we'll give people another couple of minutes to get their answers in, and then we'll review the results. All right, I don't see too many more responses coming in, so I'll give about 10 more seconds to get your responses in.
I feel like we need Final Jeopardy music right now.
I don't know if that's the song. Is that the right song? I think that's the song.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun. All right. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Can everybody see the results? Yeah, okay, good. All right, so good job, guys. So on the first question, we've got almost everyone got that answer right. So which rapid rehousing participants will receive a utility allowance? The answer is only people who are responsible for paying their own utility costs. The second question stumped a few more people, but still the vast majority of our folks got that one right too. What determines the utility allowance amount that the rapid rehousing provider should enter into the rent calculation tool? And we're going to use the amount that's shown on the DOH utility allowance schedule. And then the third question, again, you guys are rocking it. You are all A students. Which utility allowance amounts should the rapid rehousing provider enter into the rent calculation tool? And the right answer there is that you're going to verify on the lease which utilities the participant is responsible for paying, and you're going to enter only those utilities that they're responsible for paying on the lease. Good job. All right. So, all right, we're going to walk through a couple of examples here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Melanie pretty quickly. So, and just a reminder, as we walk through these examples for folks that are here, maybe from some of our YHDP programs, these examples are using the not the YHDP rent standards. So so they're going to be a little different if you're with YHDP, but not changing. Nothing's changing for YHDP. So our first example is Ms. Ramos. She's in month 2 of rapid rehousing, and her lease says that she's responsible for paying heat and electric, and she's got very little monthly net income. Maybe she's just doing some childcare or something on the side. She's got very little, $100 a month net income, right? So, and she's in month 2. So her rent per month is $1,000. Her utility allowances for her heat and her electric are $50 each, so that's $100 total. So when we calculate Ms. Ramos's share, the tenant portion, which she has to pay in month 2, the rent calculation tool will do this automatically. It's $100 times 30%, so that's $30. That is all that Ms. Ramos is responsible for. So she's going to pay that $30 to the utility company, right? That's going to cover her utility allowance. And the remaining $70 of the utility allowance, right, she's entitled to a utility reimbursement. So ACT is going to pay that $70 to the utility company, or if she wants, directly to her if she's a COC participant. And Ms. Ramos is going to pay nothing to the landlord, right? So before we were considering utility allowances, she would have had to pay that $30 to the landlord. Now she doesn't have to pay that $30 to the landlord, right? So, and then Rapid Rehousing, the program, is going to pay a total of $1,070, right? So they're going to pay the full rent at $1,000, plus with written permission from Ms. Ramos, they're going to pay $70 in Rapid Rehousing funds to help her with her utilities. Now, there may be more money that she owes to the utility companies, right? That $100 may not cover those 2 bills, or I don't know, maybe it's all one bill to one utility company. So whatever else she owes to the utility company, she obviously also has to pay that. Okay, our second example is Mr. Lynch. Mr. Lynch is also in month 2 of the Rapid Rehousing program. And he's same thing, responsible for his heat and electric. His monthly income, he's got a lot more money, right? He's got net income of $1,000 a month, still not very much, but a lot more than Ms. Ramos. And his rent, just like Ms. Ramos, is $1,000 per month. His utility allowances are the same, 50 plus 50, $100 per month in a utility allowance, right? And again, he's in month 2. So our rent calculation tool is going to calculate 30% times 1,000. So his tenant portion is going to be $300 per month, right? His utility allowance, remember, is $100 per month. So he's going to pay that $100 to the utility company, and then that covers the entire utility allowance, right? So he's not going to be eligible for a utility reimbursement because his share is already covering the full utility allowance. But he is going to have to pay $200 less than he would have otherwise to his landlord, right? Because he's going to pay the $100 of his portion to the utility company, $200 of his portion to the landlord. And then Rapid Rehousing is going to pay $800, right? So his rent is $1,000. He's paid his landlord $200. So the Rapid Rehousing is only going to pay $800 to his landlord, right? And then the Rapid Rehousing isn't going to pay anything in a utility allowance because his $100, his portion fully covers the utility allowance. And again, in all of these cases, whatever's still remaining at the end of the day to the utility allowance, to the utility companies, is the tenant's responsibility to pay that remaining amount. Okay. And then we're going to look at a third example, Mrs. Hassan, that helps us to understand how this impacts when we determine when to discontinue Rapid Rehousing rental assistance. So in this case, just a reminder about what the overall rule here is. So the financial assistance ends when 60% of a tenant's net income is equal to or greater than gross rent, right? And when we figure out what gross rent is, and again, the tool does all of this, the gross rent is the rent plus the utility allowance. So in Mrs. Hassan's case, again, she's responsible for heating and electric, just like the other two examples we looked at. Her rent is $1,000 per month. She's got a lot more income, right? So her net income is $2,000 per month. And so when you look at 60% of net income, right, she's at $1,200. So 60% of 2,000 is 1,200. The utility allowances are 100. So the gross rent, right, which is the rent plus the utility allowance, is $1,100. So her portion, $1,200, is greater than $1,100, right? So she's not entitled to any Rapid Rehousing assistance. So remember, you can keep her enrolled in Rapid Rehousing, right? Because you can continue to provide case management assistance for her for up to 6 months. But the financial assistance part is going to end because now her income, her net income, is more than 60% of gross rent. All right. So
Sorry,
a couple more things.
There's a question, why the preference to pay utility company instead of the landlord first?
So that's just the way, I'm not sure if I understand the question. So the utility company, that's just the way the utility allowance works, right? Like, so it's going to be up to the tenant, right, who they actually pay, right? The tenant may choose to pay the landlord first and then the utility allowance, but automatically their utility allowance gets applied by the program to their utility allowance gets applied by the program first, or excuse me, their tenant portion gets applied by the program first to their utility allowance and then to the rent. That's just the way, that's the HUD rules. It's just the way that it works. Okay, so I'm going to just go through the next couple of slides quickly so that I can pass off to Melanie and we can make sure we get through her slides, and then we'll answer any remaining questions that don't get answered in Melanie's portion at the end. So I'm just going to hold questions for the next couple of minutes to make sure we can get through all the content. So like I said in the beginning, we're really trying to make this all as easy as possible for you guys. So we just broke this down into 5 simple steps that you're going to need to take to do this, right? So the first one is that you're going to go to the DOH website and you're going to download the DOH utility allowance schedule that starts on July 1st, 2022. What year is this? 2022, right? The second thing you're going to do is you're going to enter the utility allowances only for any utilities that the tenant is responsible for paying into the rent calculation tool, okay? And you want to make sure you get the most current rent calculation tool, which is going to be posted to the website in the next couple of days. you're going to check the lease, right? You're going to check the lease to make sure that you've only entered into the rent calculation tool the utilities that the tenant is specified in the lease as being responsible for paying. And then if the tool tells you that the tenant portion is less than the total utility allowance, you're going to ask the tenant, to consider authorizing ACT to pay that utility reimbursement directly to the utility company. And again, that's form number 13. And then you're going to follow the ACT procedures for how to actually get the check cut by ACT to the tenant. And Melanie's going to go through those details in just a minute. So question, do all Rapid Rehousing participants who get a utility allowance also get a utility reimbursement? And the answer to that is no, right? Only tenants where the utility allowance exceeds the tenant portion are going to get the utility reimbursement. So it's really, so the reason that we're going through all of this today, even though the tool really does all this math for you, it's so important for you guys to understand what's happening in that tool, because you need to be able to explain it to your tenants, right? I feel like when we're not able to give people a good answer to their questions, it can make people feel like there's something fishy going on, right? That there's, something that we're withholding, right? That there's information that we're not giving them. So it's super important for you guys to understand this so that you can explain it. And then DOH also requires you guys to give a written notification to the landlord and to the tenant about, who's paying what, basically. So when you do that for the landlords, when you do the initial calculation, and so that's form 17B, and you do that for the tenants every time you recalculate rent. So under the new rules in the new Rapid Rehousing Operations Guide, you only have to recalculate rent every 90 days unless the tenant has an increase in net income of more than $40 per month, and then you have to recalculate again, right? So, but every time you recalculate, you want to try to explain to people where you came up with those numbers, right? What do those numbers mean and why? Some people might not care, but for people who want the details and are asking questions, you want to make sure that you understand it. So I see somebody in the chat says they can't click on the forms. So, on the screen, you won't be able to, in the slides, you won't be able to click on the forms. In the PDF, you should be able to click on the forms. But if you have any trouble, just reach out to Shannon and we'll make sure we get you the live links that you can click on. Can't click on it in the PDF either. Okay, we'll look into that. So, all right. I'm actually gonna skip the second review. We can come back to it at the end if we have time, and I'm gonna turn it over to Melanie.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren.
I'm gonna stop
so
my
much.
share and let Melanie start her share.
So it's great to see so many familiar faces on this call today. So welcome. And so you see us in person. We really are humans and not just names on a computer screen from ACT Fund's email, right? So it's great to see some familiar names and put faces to those names. So for those of you who have your cameras on, thank you. If you're not able to have your camera on, if I could just have a thumbs up in the reaction so I know folks are with me, I appreciate that. Please put your questions in the chat. Brendan will be monitoring the chat for us as well. I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, Brika and Brendan, who you guys probably know their names. You also might know Maria, but she's not here today. She's on PTO. So I am going to share my screen and away we go. So this is the fiduciary portion of all the wonderful information that Lauren just shared with you. And I like to name this presentation, How to Get Your Application Approved on the First Try. because everybody knows it's annoying when your applications get rejected or they go into pending, right? Can we agree that that's annoying? Because it means you have to do more work, right? And unfortunately, we are in the position, the unfortunate position of telling you guys what you do wrong all the time. And this is no way of a reflection of how we feel about you, but HUD is very specific about what it is that we are supposed to do. And so our job is to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed so that when HUD comes to audit us, we don't get cited and lose any money for the community, right? That's our job. And so sometimes that means telling you what you did wrong. I can promise you, if you got something past us one time, you probably won't get it past us a second. And the rules are changing, so we have to work together. And so before we get started, that was a lot of information from Lauren. So I want us to just all take a deep breath because it's going to be okay. All right. This is more work for all of us. And the best way to make more work go right is if we all work together. We are partners. We want to pay your clients' bills. I promise you, we want to write the check. We want to get it out the door in a timely fashion. That is always our goal. And we process about 1,000 tickets per month, right? 1,000 tickets come into ACT's ticketing system every month. And of those 1,000, these are the 4 people that you see on the screen who are handling all of those 1,000 tickets. Wouldn't you agree that that's a lot of work for 4 people? So be patient with us, please. And try to understand that when we ask you for something, it's not because we're trying to be mean. And when you answer us back, remember that we're human beings and we have feelings. Okay? And so this is the team. And we work really, really hard to make sure that your clients' bills get paid. And we want to also make sure that we're following HUD's rules for DOH. That's our job. So in order to be eligible for the utility allowance payments, we have lots of different rapid rehousing projects. And if you are enrolling a client in a rapid rehousing project, you should know whether that's an ESG or CT BOSS or a YHDP project. We're not talking about YHDP here today, right? We're only talking about ESG and BOSS or ODFC. So these apply to the ODFC Continuum of Care as well for utility reimbursement because those are COC grants. Okay, so not just CT BOSS, but also ODFC. So if you're down in Fairfield County, please know that this also applies to you guys. All right, they have to be enrolled in a rapid rehousing project to be eligible for this allowance. They have to also be deemed necessary to need a utility allowance for housing stability. That's a HUD rule, right? And the tenant has to be responsible for paying utilities as a condition of their leasing agreement. That's another HUD rule, just to reiterate what Lauren already said. And we will verify this in the lease when you send us that initial application. Some of you are super efficient and have already sent in your July rents. If you're going to be using utility allowance for those rents, you're going to have to retract those applications, right? And resubmit them. Otherwise, we're happy to process them as they are. So if you've already submitted July rents and you want to retract them, please submit an email to actfunds@act-ct.org with the client ID and that you want to retract their application, and we will send you a rejection. Okay, because we're not processing July yet, but we've already assigned some of those tickets to staff to process them. They're low priority right now. So as Lauren said, for clients with a rental portion, where the rental portion paid by ACT, Rapid Rehousing, exceeds the amount of the utility subsidy, we will be using all of our regular procedures for initial and ongoing applications, just as you've been using since we started the ticketing system a year and a half ago. The amount of the utility SIP subsidy that you are applying for that's going to be deducted from the rent has to match what's on the utility, the rental calculation form for utility subsidy. So we will be checking those numbers when we check the application. If your FSR is incorrect, it's going to get kicked back. So make sure that your FSR is exactly what it is on the rental calculation. And the client is expected to use this deduction in rent to pay their utility expense. So as a case manager, while you're counseling them, like Lauren said, you know, we'll go back to one of her examples. If they're having $100, if Mr. whatever his name is having $100 deducted for his rent, the case manager has to talk to that client and be like, this isn't $100 of free rental assistance. This $100 is going towards your utilities, right? So that's part of their budget that you're working on with them in case management and trying to move them towards independence. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, so far so good? All right. And the utility subsidy is not necessarily going to cover 100% of their bill, and it's not supposed to, right? They are responsible for paying their bills as laid out in the agreement. So when they don't pay their light bill and they come into you with a shut-off notice, I don't know how you're going to handle that, but I will be asking some questions, because I think at that point, we're not going to be able to use ESG or COC dollars to pay any arrearages for lights. So make that very, very clear. If they are getting a subsidy, that they're not going to be able to access additional funds. They can, however, go to community access agencies around the state and continue to access utility assistance based on their income, right? And that is allowable, because even in PSH, right, people who are on PSH who get a subsidy allowance from Section 8, they still qualify for utility assistance from community action. So I would continue to encourage them to follow through with those procedures as well. So for BOSS and ODSC, there's two ways that we can make payments, as Lauren said. So just to reiterate, we can do this directly to the utility company or companies, or we can pay it directly to the tenant, which we would prefer that to be the exception rather than the rule. So as you're having these conversations with clients, let them know it's an option, but please make sure you are clear with them of the implications that might pose to them of accessing that option. So the tenant has to authorize us to make a payment to the utility company. Please upload that into HMS under files and documents, not just files, files and documents, because that's the one we can see. Make sure that the release is active when you upload that document, or else we won't be able to see it. And make sure it's clearly labeled, because some of these clients have a million things uploaded into their HMIS file. And if we don't see it and we have to spend hours searching for files, it slows down our processing. It slows down rents getting paid. Again, there's only 4 of us and 2.25 of us are doing the majority of the work. Okay. So just please keep that in mind. If we need a copy of the bill, because that has the account information and it has the service address. We can't pay a bill for Auntie M that doesn't live in the house. So it has to, the address of the service and the address of the bill have to match up. And then we will pay the utility company based on that. For oil companies, and this is specifically to answer Jeff's question that was in the chat earlier, for oil companies, we will pay them on a monthly basis. So what will happen to those clients who might have like a delivery fee once a year, they will get a credit on their account. And I encourage you to teach the clients how to keep track of that with the utility company. Oil companies are a little bit different. So oil and propane, some of your clients might heat with propane. If they heat with propane or oil, those companies are usually LLCs. So any company that's an LLC, we need a W-9 for. Most like Suburban Propane, Springbrook fuel, all of those places will need a W-9 for those folks, okay, before we can make those payments. We have to report all the payments that we make because these are HUD funds and there's rules about government housing funds and how they get reported. Anything over $599 gets reported on a 1099. Those 1099s are issued to individuals and companies in January. We use a third-party vendor to issue 1099s. So we submit them all of the information of all our payees and all our vendors once a year. And at the end of January, all of those go out the same time W-2s go out for employment. So it's the same rules of when they have to be issued because they're considered income. If we pay a tenant, it requires the client to provide a W-9 in their name with Social Security up front. And we will make sure that that tax ID matches what's in the IRS system before we make the payment on all counts. So you guys are familiar with that procedure. The same thing will happen with individuals. And the FSR needs to be made out to the client correctly with the address where the payment is going to be mailed. So in addition to your regular FSR, if we're making an additional payment either to the utility company or an individual, we will need a separate FSR for that payment.
Melanie's got a question in the chat.
Yep, go ahead.
It's, you don't need a copy of the updated bill every month, correct? Since you're paying the reimbursement credit, not the actual bill, you'll need one bill that shows the account and address, correct?
That is correct. And if there's any change in that account, let's say they have a new person move into the household and they change the name on the bill, or there's any changes to that account, or they decide to go with a new supplier for oil, we will need new information regarding that bill or that company at that time. But other than that, you should, if there's no change, you should only ever have to upload this information one time into HMIS. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm seeing head nods. Good, great.
So got another question here. I see the tenant needs to give permission in writing. Is this a letter the tenant is supposed to write and we upload it to files and docs?
No, it's the form number 13 that Lauren spoke about in her presentation. It will be up on the CT Boss website. We'll also make it available on, we'll also put a link to the Boss's website from our website. So you guys can either look in one, it'll be available in multiple locations. And if for some reason you can't find it that way and you email us at Act Funds, we'll just send it to you because we're nice like that.
And then the second part of the question, do they have to upload that to the files in HMIS?
Yes, that has to be uploaded to files and documents, either as a part of your initial application or for ongoing, you can put it as a separate document. Just make sure it's clearly labeled what it is. But if you're doing this for a client's initial application, you can just place it in the initial packet and we'll check off that it's there.
Katie put the link to it right in the chat. Thank you, Katie. And then Katie also clarified in the chat for YHDP projects that have already been incorporating the utility allowance. You do need to get that form number 13 for anyone that you are is getting the utility reimbursement paid to the utility company. Just like the other clients, they also need form number 13. And that there's a slightly revised YHDP rent calculation tool that has been posted to CT Boss also. So make sure you're using that new slightly revised rent calculation tool.
And if you send us an application with an old rent calculation tool, we're going to kick it back to you after July and say, nope, wrong form, send it again. Sorry, try again. Better luck next time. And that will put your application into pending, and then it will delay the processing of that application. So please use the most updated forms. Take all the other forms you have and throw them in the garbage and start using the new one. Delete it from your computer, put it in your archive, make it go away. You'd no longer need it. use the new one, please and thank you. We appreciate your cooperation with that.
2 more questions. Is there an expiration to that release? And I think that release you're referring to form number 13. Katie, I don't think I can't remember the details on that, but I don't think it expires. I think it's a one-time. Melanie shaking her head, no.
Right, so most releases would be valid for 12 months to 24 months in my experience, and most clients are never going to be in rapid rehousing for that long. So hopefully, you know, if I would say it's a one-time thing unless the client returns and they have a new utility company and a new lease, then we're going to need it again. Like if a client leaves rapid rehousing, they return to homelessness and then come back into rapid rehousing, we would probably need it new for that version of that episode of their services.
And then finally, another question. When you say initial application, is that the same thing as doing rents like an FSR?
So there's 2 types of applications that we collect at ACT. We collect ongoing rents, right? So somebody who's already established in rapid rehousing month 2 and beyond, that's ongoing assistance, right? So that's for people who've already leased up. Initial applications are for new lease ups. So clients who are in a brand new unit, who have a new lease, we have to check, make sure rent reasonableness, make sure income, make sure homeless verification, all of those things that have to be for a new lease up for rapid rehousing. That is the distinction between the 2 types of applications. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
I don't see a follow-up question, so we're going to assume yes.
Great.
I just wanted to also correct one thing that Shannon pointed out to me that I misspoke on earlier. So I said that you can provide case management assistance for up to 6 months after rapid rehousing ends. That's the HUD rule, right? That it can be for no longer than 6 months, but the local rule is actually 60 days. So thank you, Shannon, for catching that. So if you look in the operations guide says 60 days because that's the local rule. And we've got another question. On the initial payment, it was stated 100% security first month rent and utility. Clients do not get the utility bill until 30 days or so after. So what should we do?
Yeah, so in that case, that's when we're going to accept a letter from the utility company that states what the service address is and the account number. So you can get that information as soon as a client has utilities turned on in their name. And you can get that as a letter from the utility company. So it's going to require a little bit of extra work on the client's part in order to get that documentation. If they don't have it, they don't get the subsidy. It's as simple as that. And so, I mean, we could catch up the following month, but unless we have that documentation on file, we can't make a payment. So in the case where you can't get it for an initial, I would say month 2, you can catch up with that. But we cannot make payments to anybody and we cannot do a utility allowance if we don't have information about what the utility is or who the company is. So we can always catch up on the 2nd month, but without that information, we can't do anything. But you can get it. You can get it very easily and they can fax it to you and they will.
And the client could opt to get it directly to them, right? So you don't need the utility. So the client could also opt to get it directly to them, which we hope people won't do, but that's also an option because the client is always entitled to it.
On a COC project only, not for ESG.
Thank you, Melanie, on a COC project only.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
All right, so utility payments, ESG doesn't allow us to make direct payments to tenants unlike COC. So I just want to be very clear about that. If we see that you're requesting a direct payment for an ESG client, we're going to kick that back to you. We have to have authorization to make the payment to the company with using that form number 13 that Lauren talked about. We have to have some bill of the client's name, in the client's name, the tenant's name, or somebody that's in the household for ESG. They have to be residing in the household in order for this to work. Because sometimes people can't have utilities on their name because they have back balances and they have bad credit with the utility company. If that's the case, then you should be using rapid rehousing dollars to pay those arrearages at the onset of their housing. so that they can have utilities in their own name for housing stability purposes. A lot of landlords require those utilities to be turned on as a condition of the rent agreement, the lease rather, rental agreement, lease, same thing, right? And so if that's a condition of their rental agreement with the landlord and they don't have lights on, then that's gonna be problematic for them. And if it's in somebody else's name that's not in the household, that person can very easily call the light company and say, this is fraud. I do not live at this address. Here's the proof. Please turn this service off. And then that's gonna pose problems for the clients. So we just wanna make sure that that's, clear. We will issue 1099s in accordance with tax rules. So big corporations like Eversource and Connecticut Natural Gas and, whatever's down south, Yankee Gas, United Illuminating, whatever they are, they don't get 1099s. They just get payments because they're corporations and they have different tax rules. So any LLC or individual must be issued a 1099 over $5.99 in payment. All right, so this is all our regular procedures. So there's going to be a review for some of you. It might be new to somebody who's new to this world. Before you submit a ticket to act, make sure that all your HUD required documents are uploaded. Supervisors who sign off on rental calculation forms and all these forms that come to act, please make sure that your staff has uploaded these documents into HMIS before signing off on them. I can't tell you how many times we go into a client's record and there's no FSR for something that a ticket has been submitted to. It wastes our time and we then have to put something into pending or we have to reject it and then it's more work for everybody. So please make sure that everything is uploaded and there. Use the checklist. There's a wonderful checklist that DOH has just released that's going to be a part of the new procedural guide. Please use that form to make sure that everything is uploaded. Create your financial service request according to the rental calculation sheet. If we have to pay an individual or a company, we will need an FSR for that individual or company separately from the one you do for the landlord. An FSR is a financial service request. This is different than the funds request form that your supervisor signs off on. Funds request form is a paper form that your supervisor signs off on. FSR, financial service request, is what goes into HMIS. Nutmeg has wonderful instructions on how to do an FSR. We are not Nutmeg, but we routinely help people who are newer to the field to know how to do these things. If you can take the time to go on to Nutmeg's website and look at the procedural guidance, that would help all of us. Please take the initiative to do that. Supervisors, again, please review this information because this is new. So extra attention is going to need to be paid to make sure that folks are doing this correctly. And then submit a ticket to act via email. And you guys all know what that looks like, right? That community_assistance. We're going to go over that at the end. All that will be on the screen. So this is your new Rapid Rehousing Fund Request Checklist. This will be uploaded onto CT Boss. It will also be on ACT. There will be a link from ACT to CT Boss. You guys have it. This is part of your new forms. If you use the old one, see where it says revised 5/2022 at the bottom? We will be looking at that. If my team sees any other date on there, guess what? It's getting kicked back. It's going to go into pending. And then you're going to have to resubmit the new checklist, okay? And this is per DOH.
So we got a couple things in the chat, Melanie. So Katie and actually Shannon both posted helpfully the link to the checklist. So you've got that link in the chat. And then Ida has a question. Do you know if there will be an email when the newly updated operations guide is on the BOSS website? And absolutely, we will get out an email. We'll try to just release both at the same time, both the pending tool and the operations guide, because we try not to clutter your email inbox. So when both of those things are up, we'll get an email out, unless one of them is delayed. And then there's a question, when is this effective? And yes, it is effective. All of this is effective starting July 1.
For
So you wanna-
rents for July 1, yep. That's our
But
new
it was for
fiscal
rents
year.
for August,
Um,
because they're already doing July rents, like this
yeah,
seems.
I referenced that, Jen, in the beginning of my presentation, and what I said about that was if you've already done July rents and you want to do this for July rents, just send us an email to Act Funds and we will retract those applications and you can resubmit. And if you don't choose to do that, we can catch up in August. That's your choice. Amanda has her hand up.
Thanks, Melanie. Are we going over this checklist in detail, or should I ask the questions I have about it now?
I'm not going over the checklist. If you have questions about the checklist, we could direct those to DOH. We didn't make this checklist, but it is a required form.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I think they're relevant to you, I
Okay.
guess.
If I can answer them, I'll answer them.
And
Or-
Katie's
or-
on the line, so she can
DOH
answer them
is here.
maybe.
So under ESG, the utility assistance arrearage, if it's just the like utility reimbursement, I'm assuming we're just not checking off either of those two sub bullets, the 6-month arrear or the 12-month, we're just putting an amount in the amount requested section.
Correct.
Okay.
So utility, actually, on page 2 of this form, you'll notice that, oops, sorry. On page 2 of the form, you'll notice that it says rental is funding source, and then rental assistance, and then utility assistance. That's part of the rental assistance, right? And so then rental arrears is in the next box down.
So when we're submitting for a utility reimbursement, we're choosing rental assistance?
Well, if you're doing a utility reimbursement that is paid to, that is just deducted from the rent, then it'll just be rental assistance. If you're doing one that is going to be paid somewhere else, you'll have to do the rental assistance in one box and the utility assistance on the other.
Okay, yes. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. When I say reimbursement, I mean, I'm assuming there's a check going out to somebody, whether it's the client or the utility company. Then so in terms of the packet that gets submitted, can we do one packet? So what you basically just said is we could do one packet where we check off rental assistance and utility assistance, make sure everything is included in that one packet, but submit 2 separate FSRs in HMIS that both share that same packet, correct?
That's correct. The same as you would do for a security deposit versus first month rent. Well, they just have to be separate. You can't have 2 different payees on one FSR. So
Just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. Thank you.
Yep, for sure. And on that FSR in the reference line, make sure that you are putting what it is. So if it's a utility allowance FSR, you're going to need to write utility, the month, and the year. So it like you would do rent May 2022, it's going to be utilities May 2022. That's really, really important because our finance department uses that to track the payments and what month they're allocated to on our spending dashboards. And we really, and without that, it's an impossibility of us tracking your spending month to month. So we appreciate you guys including that information on the reference line. It's super important. Here's your W-9. So a couple of things about the W-9. On a W-9, it either has to be an individual or a business. It cannot be both. If it's an individual, there's a social security number. If it's a business, it has a tax ID number, right? Or EIN. Does that make sense? All right. The EIN for businesses, we can't have 2 different numbers there. We have to have just one number. And that has to match what's in the IRS records. So please make sure. We also have to have verification of ownership for initial applications. That used to be waived, but it's no longer waived. It's a requirement. Under the HUD waivers, it was part of what was waived, but we can't, it's no longer waived. So we have to have verification of ownership. And that verification of ownership must match what's on the W-9. Really important. We can't just be putting W-9s out to whoever, whenever, and some landlords don't even know what their business name is because they have 20 different business names, and that can be frustrating. So what they can do is they can go to their city hall and they can get information about the owner of that building and print that out from their city hall and use that as verification of ownership for tax purposes to then know what tax information to access from their business. Because they have, some of these landlords have like 20 LLCs and they don't know which one's which, and they're off by like a one word or whatever, but it has to be an exact match with IRS or else we can't issue the 1099, which is a problem. And they almost always result in a 1099 because almost all the time we're paying more than $599 to a landlord on a client's behalf. All right, when you submit an FSR, the account number and the provider name have to match. You see that circle, top circle? And this is an ODFC project that I'm giving you an example of. This is what it looks like when we copy the FSR out of HMIS. So if you print an FSR, this is what it looks like on our end. It has the client's name, the client ID, the date it's referred, and there's that reference, right? That reference line is so important. Please double check the address. There are stuff that's preloaded into HMIS that's incorrect. There are so many incorrect landlord addresses. Don't just find the landlord in HMIS and put it, because 9 times out of 10, you can't guarantee that that address is going to be correct for that landlord. The other thing is sometimes landlords elect to have things mailed to a different address. We will mail the check to whatever name is on the FSR. If it's not the same address as what's on the rental calculation sheet, or I'm sorry, the W-9 sheet, if it's not the same address, we need authorization in writing from that landlord in order to be able to send that payment to a different address. And that has to be loaded into the client's file in HMIS.
Melanie, you have a couple questions in the chat.
Can I hold those questions?
Sure, yeah.
We're running up against time and I want to make sure I get through the presentation. Our email address for how to submit a ticket is on the screen. It's community_assistance@act-ct.org. Brendan will put that in the chat for us so you guys have it. For subsidies, where the utility allowance is deducted from the rental portion, follow normal rapid rehousing ticketing guidelines. So HMIS ID, either initial ongoing security deposit plus month of assistance. We will see on the rental calculation tool that part of the rental assistance is a utility reimbursement. You don't have to note it, okay? For direct payments, so payments that are going to be made directly to a utility company or directly to the client themselves, you are going to put HMIS, utility subsidy, and the month of assistance. So it could be ongoing and utility substance and the month of assistance, or it could be a separate ticket. It is your choice. But if we get multiple submissions, they will be rejected. And that should also be avoided because multiple submissions means a slowdown of our process. It means we are looking over a ticket twice and it takes us double the time to do that. So try to only submit once. And if you're not sure whether or not you submitted and you can't remember, don't just submit a ticket. Send an email to funds@act-ct.org. We will answer you within 24 hours, usually, as long as it's business hours, but normally within the same day. And if you send emails to community_assistance@act-ct with questions, it will create a ticket and that slows us down. So please, 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 any questions, concerns, comments, you're not sure about something, funds@act-ct.org. That is also a useful place to report any changes in a household. So if a client moves from one unit to another, please don't just send us an ongoing and initial ticket for the client again. Please let us know in the body of the ticket email that you are submitting an initial for a client who has moved units. If it's a prorated rent, please let us know that and don't make us search throughout the entire packet in order to obtain that information. Remember, we're looking at 1,000 of these a month. So as much information as you could give us in the body of that email, the more helpful it is to us, the quicker we can process your applications and get those payments out. One request per client, per household, right? So when you have you have multiple clients that you're submitting tickets for, one HMIS ID per ticket. And I encourage you to put both security deposit and initial on the same ticket so that the same processor is processing that, because we distribute tickets, right? So if you have an initial application and you submit 2 separate tickets for that, the first month's rent payment could go to one person and the security deposit could go to another. And then they're going to say to you, we haven't paid a security deposit for this client. We don't have any record of an initial application, but really that initial is with somebody else. So put your initial applications all in one ticket, first month's rent and security deposit, one ticket, okay? That would be really helpful for us. And then if you're approved, you'll receive, when you submit the ticket, you're going to get an email that says, we've received your submission. And then this is kind of annoying, I know, because you get a lot of emails from us, but very important to pay attention. Once it's been assigned to somebody, you're going to get another email saying your ticket has been assigned. Once that person has processed your application, you're going to get one of 2 things. Either A, it's been moved to finance and payment is pending, or B, it's pending and there's things that you need to let us know. We do not get notifications from HMIS when you update things. So you must respond to that email and let us know whenever that work is completed so we can go back into the application and process it. If you don't tell us, that application is going to sit there. If it sits there for more than 20 days, it will be closed and you'll need to resubmit. That will delay your client's rent payment. And nobody wants to piss off the landlords, right? Because we have so few right now that we need to be really nice to them and we need to like keep them because there's not so many rolling around. We also need to create realistic expectations with these landlords when we are starting relationships with them, that this is a process and sometimes things take time, but that if they are one of our landlords, assuming that the client is residing there and they have a rental agreement with Rapid Rehousing, they are going to get paid. It's just a matter of we have to meet the HUD requirements. And sometimes that's on the landlord. If you submit your application incorrectly or it is a duplicate, you will get a rejected submission email. Once the application is approved and goes to our finance department, please do not respond to that ticket any further. If you have questions about that application, please send it to funds@act-ct.org and then we'll be able to answer it for you. And if we have something pending, you're going to get an annoying email every 48 hours that says you cannot move forward with your submission until we hear back from you. So if you forget to tell us that you did something in HMIS, we will remind you. And we need you to respond back as soon as it's ready. And if you don't have something ready, don't respond to us and be like, oh, I'm still waiting for the landlord. We don't care. Sorry. We really don't. That's not necessary information for us to have. It's not helpful for us. So don't talk to us again until we have what we need, because otherwise we're just going to be going in and clearing up information that doesn't help you or the client. But if it's getting close to 20 days and you think it's going to be closed, do contact us at funds@act-ct.org to let us know if there's any additional information that we need to know. And we can set the ticket to stay open longer than 20 days if we have to. Okay, we'll make a note of it. Sometimes landlords don't get back to us in a timely fashion. We get that that's not a you problem, that's a landlord problem, but hopefully they want to get paid, so they're going to get back to you quickly. Any questions on anything?
So we've got a couple questions that I think weren't already answered in the chat. One is, will the client's account number be listed on the check that the act cuts to the utility company?
Yes, and you need to put it in the FSR.
Great. And then the second one is, what are acceptable verification of ownerships for businesses?
So they're gonna have a title or a deed, right? If they're the full owner, they're gonna have a mortgage statement if they have a mortgage, or a printout from the town stating that they are the owner of the property for on their taxes. Those are the acceptable forms.
And I think you've got a hand up from Katrina.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I wasn't talking about ownership for like the property. I was talking more for like the small businesses, like the oil companies. Do we have to prove that they are the owner of the business, or anything of that nature?
No, we won't have to do that because the business name will be on the W-9 and we'll verify their business with IRS. So you won't have to do verification of ownership for that. But for the properties, we have to have verification of ownership for HUD. Because a lot of times there's fraud, right? So like somebody might sublease, like try to sublease their unit for a higher amount of rent. We've had things like that happen where a tenant is renting a unit and they try to sublet the unit and they're not the owner of the property, and then they collect rent as income, and that's not allowable under HUD rules for subleases. Does that make sense? All right.
So there are a couple of other questions in the chat. Where do we get the Excel sheet where we do the new rental calculations? That's going to be posted on the link that Shannon put in the chat box earlier. It's also linked in the slides. It's CT Boss's resource page. So it's www.ctboss.org/resources. It's not there yet because DOH is still putting the final touches on it. We'll be there within the next few days, and we will send out an email when it's there. And then how do we decide if we're doing a reimbursement or an allowance? You don't need to decide, right? The tool automatically determines whether or not someone is going to get the reimbursement, and it'll be calculated by the tool. And then it says, I'm guessing this applies to rapid exits as well. Have to figure out utility allowance.
Yeah, if it's an ESG or a COC contract, you absolutely can apply for a utility allowance. More often in those cases, you're going to be applying for an arrearage. You can't do both, right? So like if you're applying for a utility arrearage through ESG, which is most often the fund we use for rapid exits, then you would do an arrearage, but you wouldn't do a subsidy for that person. You wouldn't double dip, right? So like you would only do one. And you don't have to do a utility reimbursement so in other words, you're not going to decide if the client owes rent, it's always going to be deducted from their rent 100% of the time. We're only going to make direct payments when the client has no rental portion due and there's an excess, which is going to be pretty rare. Most of the clients in Rapid Rehousing have a rental portion. And so they're just going to get extra money towards their rent. At least they have a rental portion at some point, hopefully within the first couple of months that you're working with them, because they've, obtained employment or something like that, because you guys work so hard to get people income. And that's a requirement of Rapid Rehousing, right? Is to kind of figure out a way to get stable with income. And so that's part of what we're trying to do with folks.
So Melanie, we're about 5 minutes before the end, and I do want to just look quickly at the rest of the slides, or you're done, right?
I am done. And anybody who wants to find me can call me at this number. I'm at extension 316. And if you have any questions, you can't get a hold of a member of our team, I'm happy to take questions. And of course, there's the way to contact us, which is funds@act-ct.org. So thank you guys so much.
Can you stop your share and then I'll share it again?
Yep.
Great. All right. So just a reminder, right? This is scheduled to kick off starting July 1st. Covered that quite a bit already. We're not going to do this exercise because we're out of time, but I think, all of you, it's always good when this is all fresh in your mind to think about, okay, what now, starting from today, is my team going to do differently on July 1, so that you've got kind of your own list of what the items are that you're going to need to follow up on from today's training. And then just wanted to make sure, I'm not going to go through all of these resources slides, but there's lots of additional information we've got here for anyone who missed the original launch of the guide. There's the link to the guide, as well as the webinar that we did when we launched the guide. These are peruse these at your leisure, but I did want to look at this one, which this is how you make sure that you're on the CT Boss email list, right? So, so to make sure that you get the email that we're going to send out about when the rent calculation tool is posted and when the updated guide are posted, you need to go to our website that's linked here. Make sure you select that you are either a HUD grantee, or if you're a YHDP grantee, make sure that you select that you are a YHDP grantee, and then you will get the correct emails. And if you're an ODFC program, so the staff from ODFC are on the CT Boss email list, and so they will forward out to you guys anything that we put up that's relevant for you, that you guys need to know. I wouldn't recommend, if you're an ODFC person, that you sign up for the CT Boss email list, although you're certainly welcome. You'll get a whole bunch of stuff that's not relevant to you. I'd rely on your team to filter out and send you only the things that you need. Okay. So, so Shannon had said earlier, I see somebody's still having some trouble with the links. So if you right click on the link, you should be able to copy it and cut and paste it directly into the browser. And again, if you are just struggling with the links and you can't figure it out, reach out to Shannon or I, and we will help you and make sure that you get access to all of the materials.
Also, to sign up for that, I'm sorry, to sign up for the website, you could go to the homepage of CT Boss and there's a sign up link there. But
it's literally right on the homepage. So it's www.ctboss.org is the URL for the CT Boss page. All right. So I think we are almost exactly at time. So we appreciate you all. We appreciate the enormous amount of work that you do every day to help people who are experiencing homelessness get housing and stay in that housing. And, you know, we know that this is a little complicated and a little confusing, but I feel like it's certainly worth it because it just gets a little bit of extra money into people's pockets to help them be able to stay stable in their housing. So thank you for your time. If you've got more questions, I'm going to stay on for a couple of minutes. I'll answer as many of the questions as I can. And for the rest of you, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everybody. Shannon, you can stop the recording.